Welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. We are so excited to collaborate with Alli Therapy to provide tips for parents on managing holiday stress. We are very fortunate to have Sarah Rennick, the co-founder of Alli Therapy, and Alli Therapist Alison Chisholm as our host today. Sarah will begin today's session by introducing Alison and Alli Therapy. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll ensure all questions get addressed at the end of the session. Over to you, Sarah.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us. While I'm speaking, I'd love to hear from each of you what stage of parenthood that you're currently in, so that during the webinar, Alison can speak to you more directly and offer advice for that stage. So feel free to just jump in the chat and let us know what stage your kiddos are at. And we'll chat about that more during the webinar today. But like Chelsea said, I'm Sarah. I'm one of the co-founders of Alli Therapy. So we're a therapy company that connects parents to licensed therapists, and we support parents through all stages of parenthood, right from fertility challenges all the way to preparing for teens to leave home for the first time. Awesome, I see some ages coming through. So again, if you've just hopped on, feel free to pop the ages of your kiddos into the chat. But today we're doing a webinar for you guys on how to manage holiday stress. As parents, there are so many stressors that come up for us, and we're going to chat about them all. Often these stressors can lead to what we call holiday burnout, and that's when you're trying to manage all these perceived demands and expectations around Christmas, around the holidays, and how you can parent with more confidence as those things come up. So we're going to talk about how to say no to our kids when they're really pushing boundaries, how we maintain our child's schedule when we aren't on our typical routine, and how we can adjust expectations and make traditions, communicating all of that with our partner and staying in line the whole time. We're going to be joined by one of our Alli therapists, Alison. So Alison is a registered psychotherapist, and she's a mother of 3. She's been in practice as a psychotherapist since 2013, and her specialty is in supporting parents through transitions. So transitions are one of the most stressful parts of life that any of us will endure. But as parents, those transitions are really constant, and there's so many emotions that come up with them. So Alison really believes that parents should be supported through every stage of their journey. She has specializations in cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, emotion-focused therapy, emotional interviewing, and so much more. Her clients describe her as empathetic and open. So she's going to be leading our session today. She's going to be chatting through these tips on how to manage holiday stress. And then there'll also be time for some Q&A. If at any point during this webinar you have questions or there's something specific that you want to ask, feel free to drop it in the chat. There'll also be time at the end for Q&A. If there's anything anonymous that you want to send in that you want answered for you, feel free to send it to me directly, and I'll read that out for you during our Q&A portion. But again, if you just joined, feel free to drop in the chat the ages of your kiddos, and we'll be sure to address during the webinar today. But I'm going to let Alison take it away from here. Hey, Alison. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Hi, I was just saying that sometimes technology still eludes me, despite being, almost 2 years into this pandemic and working virtually for a lot of that time. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to everybody who's been putting their the ages of their kids in here. It's looking like it's a pretty big mix, from new babies to full-on toddlers and school-age kids, and that is, yeah, quite a nice mix, right? There are lots of different needs and demands. I am no stranger to holiday stress. My husband and I have 3 kids. Our oldest is 4. Our youngest 2 both have birthdays next week. One will be turning 3 and one will be turning 1. So December is busy for us, and we have a lot of firsthand experience in trying to figure out how to not feel crazy busy, because that adds to a lot of the stress. And I'm assuming if you're here, you are celebrating holidays this year, and certainly, hopefully, it'll be a different style of holiday celebrations than it has been in the past, like last year, for example. So I wanted to just kind of go sort of over what I've been learning and what works for us, and what has been working for other parents that I've been talking to, with sort of the new baby to school age child, able to decrease some of that holiday stress, some of that burnout, so we can actually enjoy the holidays, right? I often hear from parents that, there is an external pressure in many ways to attend all the things, to make sure that all the grandparents and all the aunts and uncles and all the family members get to see all the kids. And at least in our setup, we've got both sets of grandparents and 3 kids, and we live in a different city from both of our families. And that creates a lot of pressure sometimes for us to visit my family in one city, and then go to another city not too far away, but far enough away that it's you're not going back that night. So we're constantly moving around in the holidays. And last year was a bit of a nice kind of break. We had a newborn, there was a pandemic, we weren't visiting, and it felt really nice to be able to say, we're not going anywhere. If you want to come, you can come to us, but here are our rules. And that was really sort of empowering for us to realize, okay, we don't need to always accommodate exactly. But how do we do that in a way that doesn't make everybody feel like we're sort of not letting the family see our kids, right? So I'm just looking for my notes here, sorry. Some of the questions that I wanted to bring up, kind of address with everybody today, are how can we say no to our kids when they're pushing boundaries? And that can also apply to anybody. How do we maintain a bit of a schedule when we're not in our typical routine? And probably most importantly, how can we adjust our expectations so that we can make traditions and we can enjoy the holidays with our families, without living in that stressed state where we're maybe just yelling at each other, or not communicating in a way that feels like we're able to enjoy the holidays. So I think the first thing is to really remember that adjusting our expectations is crucial. That doesn't mean necessarily lowering the standards. Sometimes I think that can be, it can feel synonymous, okay, just lower the bar, don't clean the house, don't do this, don't go anywhere, don't make a dinner, don't, spend lots of money. And if those things are important for you, fine, right? That doesn't mean lowering or adjusting our expectations does not mean that we have to live in a chaotic state all the time. It just means that we have to be realistic and decide what are our priorities, what's essential and what's not essential. So, I think that sort of leads into the ability to say no, both to our kids and to family members, recognizing that we can't do everything, we can't be everywhere, and saying no can be very difficult. Especially, I don't know, if you're like me, saying no to my parents, for example, or my in-laws, I feel there's a lot of guilt attached to that. When we say, no, we can't make it on Christmas morning. Well, why can't we make it on Christmas morning? And I always think, oh, well, it's because I want to wake up in my own house. I want, to create the traditions for my kids. It's my turn now. And that can often come across as maybe being selfish, or it can lead to a lot of feelings of guilt, right? I have found that it can be really helpful to take some time, and before the holidays start, at the beginning of December, my husband and I write a list of priorities, and we write it down so it's on paper, of who we want to visit or where we want to go. And then we just kind of check off what's realistic. Can we get from where we live in Peterborough to Ottawa to see both, both my parents, they live in separate places, to see his parents who live in another city outside of Ottawa. Is any of that possible? How much of it is possible? Because when, it feels like we're biting off the impossible, our kids feel that too, right? And then they get out of routine and they're not sleeping, and then it's exhausting. So how do we say no? For us, it's been really important to recognize that, yes, there's often going to be disappointment when we say no. And disappointment for us, but disappointment to other people as well. And as funny as it might sound, practicing saying no beforehand can be really helpful. It doesn't mean you have to come up with some sort of big excuse, or you have to lie. I always found initially I was saying, we're just, we have too many things going on, when that wasn't really necessarily the truth. We didn't have holiday parties. We did have a lot of things going on. It was kids up in the middle of the night all the time. Our kids still sometimes wake up. Actually, most evenings, there's at least one kid awake. Most nights, most middles of the nights, there's at least one kid awake in our house. And that is a lot going on. And sometimes it's easy for, I think, grandparents or people who might not have kids or have older kids to forget that it's really exhausting to travel with kids, or it can be. So we've practiced saying no. We've done sort of those cheesy role plays, you be my mom, and I'm going to tell you that no, we're not coming for Christmas this year. But another big part of that, of the actual saying no, is the offering an alternative, recognizing that it's going to be disappointing for them and for us probably too, but then offering an alternative to say, well, we can't come this year at Christmas because we just had a baby, or I don't know, COVID, or whatever the case is, and we are planning on coming in the new year, or visiting this date, right? And oftentimes parents, when there is an alternative, parents or friends can be really understanding and recognize, oh yeah, that's right, you do have a lot going on. So practicing the saying no, as silly as it might sound, can be really helpful. And that's more in terms of speaking to other adults, our friends, our family members, when we're saying no to different things. But what happens when our constantly asking for something, right? And we can't make it all happen. That doesn't mean that we're a bad parent. It doesn't mean that, if we are not, getting a really giant Christmas tree and bringing it home and doing gingerbread cookies and hanging stockings and buying all the gifts and it doesn't mean that we're a bad parent. It doesn't mean that we're not creating traditions. You get to make your holidays whatever you want them to be for your family, right? So practicing saying no with our kids as well it can be really important and really helpful in order to create those boundaries with them. Something that can be really practical is to ask us for something very specific that we are not going to buy for them that day. It might be a fun exercise, maybe not fun in the moment, but we've tried this before where, we've gotten a gift for our kids. We celebrate Christmas in our house. So we've gotten a gift, and then, before Christmas, our kids will see that and say, oh, I want that so much, and we're in the toy store or a shop where they could get that. And it's hard because I know that I'm going to give that to them. So it almost feels like, well, why can't I just, give it to them now? Or why are we waiting? But being okay with saying no to them, to say like, we're not going to buy that today, is oddly enough can be really hard. And then there's the meltdown, right? Then there's the but I want it, and that that can be really grating. So practicing that when we know that is going to be a gift that they're going to get can be really helpful. Another thing with saying no, and that is tied into sort of the another part of beating the holiday stress, is maintaining a routine or a schedule when we're not at home, or when we've got different events going on, even in our own homes, and they're not following a typical routine. Something that can be helpful is to try to maintain the bedtime schedule as much as possible. A lot of times, I mean, our kids, it seems like most of them are pretty young. Sorry, I'm just seeing a question that is really great, and I would like to go to that. Okay, sorry. So I'm going to go to the question in a second, but I just got distracted by that. I wanted to talk about maintaining routines at home, and that is something that can be tricky. We also know, I think, as parents, that it can be really, really helpful. Kids don't often know how to tell time, the ones that are kind of the younger ones especially, but their bodies somehow do. And so maintaining a bedtime schedule that can be consistent will help, or typically will help with sleep cycles. I often recommend to parents who are maybe traveling or just doing a lot over Christmas or over the holidays to, if you want to have your kids stay up, that's really fun and special. Maybe do it one night, right? Choose a night and have them stay up later that night, and make it really exciting for them, as in, like, you get to stay up late. And then the other nights, put them to bed consistently, even when that means having your guests hang out in your kitchen or in the living room or whatever. Take the time. Or if you're in a partnership, one partner goes and puts one kid to bed, or all the kids to bed, however that works for your house. But trying to maintain that consistent schedule will really help. I shouldn't say it as an absolute guarantee, but can often really help the sleep schedule or the sleep cycle to stay generally sort of at its baseline. So before I keep going, I wanted to go back to this question here about how to respond to the argument back from parents. Well, we did it while you were kids, regarding the traveling everywhere on Christmas Day. And that is a big one and a very loaded question. I think often it can depend how much, what your response is going to be will depend very much on your relationship with your parents or your in-laws, or whoever is kind of putting it at you that, well, we did it when you were kids. I think it's totally fair to say, well, you're not raising the kids right now. This is our time. This is our turn. And this is what we've decided as a family. This is what works for us. And we recognize that we want to spend positive holidays with you. And so having our kids travel from house to house on Christmas Day is really exhausting for them. Maybe when they're a little bit older, we could do that. But this year, this is what we're doing. And this is what we're offering, in a sense. Maybe they want to come. And that's obviously not a possibility for everybody, but to be able to kind of just hold your ground and say, it's our turn now, and this is what works for us, can be something that is like a response to that, and acknowledging that they might feel really disappointed, or they might come back and say, well, that's unfair, or that's not what we want. Well, whose needs are being met here? Grandparents or the kids? And ultimately, when the kids' needs are being met, parents' needs are being met too, right? And I'm sure grandparents would prefer if there were well-rested kids coming around. I don't know, at least in our house, well-rested kids equal not as screamy children. And that's very important for us and for grandparents. I don't know if that answers your question. Again, it really, the response will vary based on your relationship, but being able to say, this is what works for our family, and this is what we need to do, coming up with an alternative can help ease some of that disappointment. I don't know if there are any other questions related to that. I certainly am mindful of the time, and I don't want to rush through. So if there are any questions around that, that's great. We can come back to that. Otherwise, I wanted to just kind of go back to maintaining the children's schedule when they're not in their typical routine. Something that we have found very helpful as well has been, and sometimes kind of impossible, but finding the right equipment for when you are traveling. So, whether it's, if you can acquire a slumber pod, which are apparently, they're like these blackout tents that go over a playpen. And apparently they're always sold out or something. But acquiring something like that, or like traveling with garbage bags, if you need to black out the windows of wherever you're staying, that's what we've been doing for the last few years. Now my dad just has masking tape and garbage bags in the basement all the time, so that we can black out the windows for our kids' rooms. And recognizing too that, sometimes babies or kids don't sleep well when they're not in their house or not in their own setting. And so trying to make it as much as possible, kind of like home, right? So white noise machines, a favorite stuffy if they sleep with one every night, if they're at that age, or like a little blanket or something. But having the right equipment and the right setup is really important. And recognizing that, you're going to get to your, I don't know, I'm going to assume parents' house or your family's house, and you're going to need to take that time to set up. Initially, my dad would always be like, "Oh, you travel with so much stuff, and you have to black out the windows." And similar to the last question, we never did that with you when you were young. And I always come back with, "Yeah, but did you enjoy it when we?" And I don't think he remembers truly. But this way, when we give ourselves the time to set up and we bring the stuff that we need whenever possible, or borrow it when we're there, it makes a lot of sense that our kids will feel a little bit more secure, and a little bit more able to fall asleep in an environment that's not typically their own. So that is something that's very practical, but can be very helpful in terms of just maintaining that routine, remembering to be very gentle with yourselves as parents, that essentially you're sort of often, I think, caught in being pulled in two directions, right? You've got your kids' needs, you've got other family members' needs, all the while having your own, of course, too, right? But needing to attend to everybody else. And that can be really stressful. If there's a time where, if you are traveling and you and your partner are able to take a few minutes and leave together, or have your kids be watched by a family member, so you can just have some time to check in and see, okay, how is this going? That can also be really helpful too, because we all have these expectations around holidays, how to make it magical, how to make it really wonderful. And sometimes we can assume that we're all on the same page, and yet we are not necessarily on the same page as our partners. Families, our Christmases, our holidays, our celebrations all look very different when we're growing up, probably. And so now that we are, families, and we're bringing kids into this mix, we want to start our own traditions. Skating around that, what our expectations are really important. In our house, for me growing up, Christmas was a really big thing. And there was Santa Claus and presents and stuff like that. And in my partner's family, it wasn't as big a deal. They did a tree and like small gifts. So when we started having kids, we had to sit down and talk, okay, what are we going to do about Santa Claus? What are we going to do about these things? And ultimately we just decided what worked for us. Right. So we don't give a whole lot of gifts. In fact, it's not even necessary because my family takes care of all that. There's a lot of gift giving on that level. So sometimes that can be something to also sit down and talk about. Okay, how are we going to communicate that with, in my case, my mom, that we don't need that much stuff. But the point of this is to sit down and prioritize what is important. What traditions do we want to create? What would make this holiday season magical or exciting or happy and festive for our family? And then go with that, right? It doesn't matter what other people do. I'm a big fan of saying that, social media can put a lot of expectations on us that we have to spend lots of money at the holiday season. And our kids might need those brand new toys. And they might, it might be really nice to have all the really exciting toys in our houses. In our case, it doesn't fit. So, and I'm tired of stepping on toys. So we don't do that as much as maybe I would have if we hadn't discussed it. But I think on a really practical level, communicating those expectations around a budget, how much money you want to spend at that point in time. If you're going to spend that money on toys or on books or on clothing or on traveling, be really specific about what that budget needs to look like, what it needs to cover, and how much you both feel comfortable spending. The other another aspect of sort of that really practical piece is just recognizing what advertising our kids are seeing. Often, I didn't realize this, but apparently Amazon sends catalogs out, and somehow we had one. In our house, our kids don't see commercials, so that's pretty nice. They don't really know what the toy of the season is, but they found this catalog, and it was pretty cute. It had stickers in it. They loved it. And then my daughter started asking for like this very specific rainbow puppy and cat that walked on its own, which, I don't know if I really want that in my house. Anyway, I think being aware of what kind of advertising they're seeing can really help to then manage their expectations around, am I going to get this? Is Santa going to bring me this? Are my parents going to be able to do this? Because sometimes, when they're little, we want to give them a gift and we want to give them the things that will make them happy, but sometimes it's not always possible, or sometimes it's too much, right? So being aware of the advertising, or just even how much advertising they're seeing, can also help to navigate those expectations that our kids put on us, and then being able to say no to them around certain things. Because it is really wonderful when we can say yes. It's also really important to be able to say no sometimes, for them even just to be able to feel feelings of disappointment, or hear no and respect that. So that sort of is, again, a really practical piece around the expectations. Another important tip that my family member, a woman in a postpartum group, was talking about recently, that I thought really made a lot of sense for me around communication and expectations, is having a calendar. Google Calendars, or I've just heard of an app called Tascade. There are tons of different calendar apps and apps, but having one that you can share with your partner can be really helpful, because then you just put in the event, you make sure that everybody's aware of that, and you get it done. that can help share the burden. A lot of times it falls to one parent to kind of create that holiday magic, do all the shopping, do all the food preparation. Not all the time, of course, but when you're able to calendarize and share the responsibility, it just makes some of the stress go away a little bit more easily. I know it requires upfront work, putting that into a calendar and making sure that you've got that kind of stuff like at the forefront, but then it's there, and then your phone's going to remind you, right? So again, that's sort of a lot of those are really practical things in order to kind of avoid that feeling of burnout that can happen, so we really can enjoy the holidays, and also just feel more confident in our parenting, right? When we've made a decision, and if again, if this a partnership, if there are two parties parenting, being able to hold each other accountable, especially with grandparents and stuff, and saying, this is what we have decided and this is what works for us, stick with it. It's there, right? You've put it out there on your calendar, on paper sometimes, and then you're accountable to that. There's less, maybe less guilt. There can be less guilt around going back and saying, oh, but now my grandmother really wants us to go meet with her friend who's not that important for us to see right now. We're together as a team, and that builds a little bit more confidence, or a lot more confidence in many cases, around the decisions that we've made and being able to stick to them. So if anybody has any other questions, could certainly open that up to discussion. I'm not entirely sure. Sarah, I don't know if you've received any questions, or if they would just be in the chat here that I just noticed.
Yeah, no questions so far, but if anyone has anything that you'd like to share anonymously, please feel free to send it over to Alison or myself privately, and also feel free to drop it in the chat if you want to send anything in that way. Any other stresses that you have around the holiday, or just questions you have in general that you want to chat through with a therapist while we have Alison. I can read these out as they come in. So we just got one from Amy, wondering if you have any tips for helping dressing up the toddlers, major tantrums, any tips?
Totally. We also go through that, I will say, like pretty much every day. All of my kids, well, except for the baby, obviously, but my older two really love dressing themselves. And as much as I love that most times, sometimes you just want a good Christmas picture, right? Or a good holiday picture, or just a picture where, there's not yogurt on the front of all of their clothing. So a couple of things around that I have found helpful, and that I've heard lots of other parents talk about, are allowing your child, your toddler especially, to have some sort of agency in making choices. So again, when you want like a very specific holiday outfit to be, sort of just put on and maybe easily taken off as well. One thing you could do is set it out the night before. We have cute little hooks where we set up our kids' clothing in their room in the evenings beforehand, and I've found that they're more inclined to, when it's set up, to grab those things and put those things on when they've sort of chosen, or at least, I've kind of said, how about this tomorrow, and go put that on your hook, please. And they've put it on their hooks, and then in the mornings, they'll put that on. Sometimes it's not always the case. And especially when there's, a family picture or something that I want them to be wearing something very specific. I would not put that on them right away. Personally, I would have them put it on before they go, or before the event, before the picture, before leaving the house, whatever the case is. But trying to allow them to have some sort of agency in that as well of, okay, would you like to put it on, or would you like me to help you? Or, if it's a holiday dress, do you want to put your arms in first? Like the silliest things. Do you want to put your arms in first or your head in first? Just the fact that they get to choose right there almost surpasses what it is that they're wearing, because a toddler wants some level of control, right? And if we don't necessarily kind of channel where they get that control, then it's just going to feel out of control for everybody, right? So I don't know if that helps. But again, I think also just recognizing that sometimes it feels impossible. And when there is that tantrum, that happens, and to be able to kind of step back and just reset, take a deep breath and say, instead of, we are going to put this on. Okay, well, maybe we'll put it on in a few more minutes. I like to just physically sometimes leave the room and come back in a few minutes and say, okay, maybe we'll put this on right before the picture, and bring it with me. And then I've found my kids are more inclined when they've gotten to choose what it is that they're going to wear, and that they know that they're just going to wear it for a picture. They can take it off right away afterward.
Awesome. Any other questions? Again, can be related to today's topic or anything parenting or being a parent in general. Also, anything that's been coming up for you in general, not around parenting, welcome to drop that in as well. So I'll just give it another minute in case anyone has anything to add.
If I could just add to, because this tantrum and getting dressed thing is not just related to holidays for sure, but I think it is a common struggle among parents. And especially I'm thinking about like getting the winter clothes on, like the outdoor stuff. That is like probably the bane of my existence. I really like, it's so hard sometimes to get outside with my kids, because it's like, we've got to dress you all up. And then the minute that you're dressed up, somebody's got to pee. It's inevitable. So allowing them again to have that agency, but really even just coming up with a routine that works for your family. If you're just trying to get to daycare, get outside on a weekend, maybe making sure that, as silly as it sounds, that they all have a pee first, and then they line up according to where their stuff is kept. And you come up with a system and you do it every time in the same way, because again, they really appreciate agency, but they also really appreciate consistency, especially around that age. So I'm seeing a few questions here, and I wonder if that helps sort of around the dealing with stubbornness in general, because that is a big one for toddlers. I'm assuming that we're talking about sort of toddlers there. In terms of the stubbornness. And yeah, I wonder if those are kind of helpful ideas around just having some sort of consistency as much as possible, while at the same time including them and giving them sort of two options, not allowing them to have too many choices, because that can be really overwhelming, but to break it down and say, again, would you like to put on your mitts first or put on your boots first? That isn't always logical, but allowing them to choose, to make a choice, and little by little that will develop into a consistent routine as well. Okay, so there was a question up here about jealousy, tips for handling for jealousy with kids of different ages getting different gifts. That's a big one. And I'll be honest, like we're kind of figuring that one out still in our house. But things that I've heard from other parents are, really allowing your kids to experience jealousy. Like that's okay. They will experience that in their lives. So recognizing that it's going to happen, at least at some point in their lives, and helping them to deal with that, right? Not to say, oh, great, well then we're going to go get you that toy too if you really like it. I mean, if that's what works, fine, go for it. But that doesn't necessarily help them to hold that jealousy and experience that jealousy, to then learn how to manage it, right? So I think something that we kind of have been trying with our kids is, especially, I mentioned two of my kids have birthdays next week, and so one of them is left out that week in a sense. We don't give birthday gifts or like gifts to the kid who's not having a birthday. And we really talk about how special that gift is to that kid. So yeah, you're feeling really upset that your brother got a stuffed dino. That's been a big one in our house lately. And you can see how happy it makes him. That's really special. Do you think that maybe he would let you play with the stuffed dino if you ask him? Or could you play together? Is there a toy that you have that is really special to you that the two of you could play with the dino and with your, I don't know, I think her favorite thing right now is a dog. Could you play a game where your dino and your dog play together too? So those are some things. I think another thing that has been really helpful, and that I've heard other parents talk about as well, is when you, especially like maybe with the differing ages, is when you have the kids make or gift something to each other. So it's allowing them to have, again, some sort of choice. And this, again, it can be a bit of work for you, but even if they're just making a card, or if you're you're out and they want to just pick up something, I don't know, like a candy or something that isn't huge, but something that you're trying to foster them thinking, oh, my brother or my sister would really like this toy or this candy, and I'd like to gift that to them. And that can kind of foster that sense about thinking about the other one, where kids are naturally selfish, right? And that's not a bad thing, but they're focused on themselves and what their experience is. So it helps to kind of shift that perspective, to be able to open their eyes a little bit to what somebody else might like or enjoy, and then practice doing that. And also recognizing, I think, that jealousy is a very normal feeling that even as adults we can feel, and to name that, to say, wow, it sounds like you're feeling a little bit jealous. Is that right? Or correct me if I'm wrong. You seem like you might be feeling jealous of this new toy or this new thing that your sibling received. And sometimes that's enough, right? Is for them to be able to say, yeah, I am feeling jealous. And then that's it. But then being able to kind of work that into an ability for them to think of the other, and wow, look how happy that makes your brother or your sister feel. Pointing out emotions on their faces. Do you see that big smile that I'm going to say brother, because that's sort of where we're dealing with the jealousy. My daughter feels it a lot to her brother. Do you see the big smile your brother has on his face? He must really love that. I get that you're feeling really jealous. And I wonder if, you might like to ask him to play with you. And usually she's fine after that. So I hope that kind of answers the jealousy thing. That was a lot of different things at once. But again, I think it's just really important to recognize that they're going to feel it, and that's okay. Okay, so there's a question here about, I hope it's okay if I read it out loud. It's in the chat, so I'm sure that's okay. Our 4-year-old is flip-flopping between wanting to be a big girl and regressing to needing help to do things she has done before and has done competently. So 2-part question. 1, is this common? And 2, how do we move past this? Okay, number 1, yes, totally common, especially when there's maybe a new baby that comes home. You didn't mention that, and that's totally fine. Regardless of, another baby or another kid, like 4-year-olds are really at a transition phase. Often they are starting school. There might be, like they're blossoming into being able to be imaginative, have friendships. So yes, it's very common. And I want to emphasize too, as silly as this might sound, but switching from season to season, there's often a lot of that because snowsuits are tricky. Layers when we're going outside can be really hard for a 4-year-old, and it can be really frustrating as well. That like, yeah, I know how to get myself dressed, but this is really tricky, and I don't know how to get my mitts on and zip up my coat. And then there's often this pressure from parents, probably unconsciously, that you know how to do this. Why is it so hard for you to do this right now? So yes, common, and very normal. In fact, it's a good thing that it's happening, because it shows that your child is in this sort of transition phase, which is exactly where that that age range, that kid should be, right? Around 3, 4, and 5. They're transitioning, they're growing, and how to move past it. Okay, so a couple things here. One, be very patient with yourselves and with your child. It is a phase, and it passes, and they grow out of it. Or maybe even to say that in a different way, they grow into it. They learn, they relearn how to do these things. Recognizing too that it's not bad that they're asking for help. In fact, that's really great, and I would recommend celebrating that. Like, when they, so she's done things in the past, recognizing, instead of saying, come on, you know how to do this, put on your pants, which is, something that I think is easy to kind of fall into because, we're rushed, we're busy. Frankly, it's annoying when our kid gets dressed every day, and then the day that we need them to get dressed on their own, they're not doing it. Super frustrating. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there, because I was just imagining this morning. That was exactly our morning. So yeah, moving past it is just recognizing that it happens. It's good. It's part of their growth, and it's very age appropriate. But also, again, giving them some choices and saying, okay, do you want to put on your pants or your shirt first? Or even offering just to sit with them while they do it can be something, okay, I'll be right here as you put on your shirt. Not necessarily always offering them help, but being there can be helpful, because at least my 3-year-old will, he'll struggle to put on his coat sometimes, and I go to help him without saying anything, and he just like, no, don't touch me, I want to do it myself, and then he can't. So it's recognizing that they're probably feeling pretty frustrated too. So sitting with them and saying, okay, I'll be right here if you need anything, and letting them ask you to help with the coat or the mitten or the shirt or whatever it is, can be something, because they still feel like they have agency there. Okay, I'm moving down. I'm seeing lots of questions popping up. So I'm moving down to the 3-year-old is sleeping late, even with a regular bedtime routine since she was a baby, napping 1 hour at preschool, wakes up at 2:30, but not sleeping at night until 9 p.m. When she doesn't nap, she's a wreck all afternoon. Is this a phase? Good question. My answer is going to be vague on purpose. It probably is a phase. 3-year-olds go through this like 2, 3, 4, like it's a big transition phase again. So I have a lot of follow-up questions here that would help me to be more precise. But I'm guessing that, if that's a big awake window, and I'm guessing that that's probably affecting everybody. The between 2:30 and 9. So she's a wreck all afternoon. It sounds like that's definitely affecting everybody's reality at home. Definitely. Okay, so definitely it can be chalked up to a phase for sure. I think also really refining your schedules, your sleep schedules can be something that is often helpful, because again, babies and young kids thrive on routine. Trying to forcing your child to sleep is often unproductive, as I'm sure we are all aware. It is hard and it is frustrating, and you're like, oh, just go to sleep. I want to go do my thing. I've found lately, especially, that when we have a solid bedtime routine, I'm assuming you probably do too. We do dinner. We don't do baths every night because I've been finding that wakes my kids up quite a bit. But like some sort of calming down activity where we even keep the lights off. We just have soft lights upstairs when it's bedtime, and we just kind of slowly make our way into bed with pajamas, teeth, books, and a snuggle. And sometimes it's a matter of staying for a little while more than I was hoping to. As much as I'd love to snuggle with my kids all night, sometimes I have to go do dishes or do other things. So giving your child the time in that time frame, and recognizing that it's probably a phase and she's probably looking for some connection, or some more connection at that time, might be what's going on. Again, that's a pretty vague answer, and I'm not being very specific because I don't have too many details here. But certainly there are there are these phases. I don't know how long your child's been in daycare, and how much sort of that good quality nap they are getting at daycare can sometimes be a factor in why they're not sleeping, because when they're overtired, we know that babies or kids don't often sleep, which seems counterintuitive because when you're tired, it's nice when you just sleep, but they don't get that. I'm seeing that other people also deal with winter clothes drama every day, so thank you for that, because that is hard and it is full on winter now. Okay, so I have a question here that says, what do you do if your toddler wakes up in the middle of the night and tries to come to your bed to sleep? I tried consistently to put him back into his bed before and it worked, but he started doing it again. Suppose I just have to keep on putting him back in his bed. So yeah, that's definitely one way to deal with it. I suppose on some level too, it really depends on what you want, right? Do you want your kid to go back to bed? It sounds like it. So yeah, bringing your child back to bed. I often have found it helpful to pick up my child when they come into my room, and when I have the mental wherewithal to realize what's actually going on, pick them up and kind of snuggle them back into bed, and lower them into their own bed slowly, and just retuck them in quietly, so that they're able to fall back asleep right away. Because when it's when it's too much of like, we turn on the lights, or we start talking to them a whole lot, or like in a normal voice, they're awake, right? And sometimes it's just like the sleep cycles. Kids and baby sleep cycles are they're different from adults, right? So it's a matter of just kind of getting them right back into that cycle. We've definitely experienced in our house where somebody wakes up and it's like scream fest. So they've had a bad dream, or who knows, the sleep cycle was interrupted, and I found that it helps to totally remove that kid from the bedroom, and we typically go downstairs in our house and we'll sit on the couch for a few minutes and just kind of sit there with the lights off, keeping it as dim as possible, and recognizing that, okay, in a couple of minutes they'll be fine and we'll take them back up to bed. But it sounds like when this is happening pretty much every night, I would try to just do the same thing consistently every time, and again, be very quiet, keep the lights off as much as possible, and just gently lower them back into their beds, retuck them in as if it's kind of the normal thing. Okay, you woken up and now we're just gonna go back to bed because it's still nighttime. Okay, so this question again is, I have a 14-month-old boy and he sometimes cries for no reason. What should we do? Yeah, so that's a bit of a loaded question as well, because again, it's tricky with a 14-month-old to figure out what the reasons are. Because typically when a kid is crying, there is some sort of reason, but we just don't always know what it is. Especially when they're 14 months, I don't know if your baby is walking and talking and communicating with more than just crying, but I really try to remind myself, especially when it's like that frustrating cry of like, I don't know how to help you right now, that they're trying to communicate to me. So I like to have sort of a mental checklist in my head. Could they be hungry, tired, thirsty, need a diaper change? Are they all being met? Okay. If they are, great. If not, I try to check those off, give them some water, make sure they're not cold or too hot even, because kids don't really know how to regulate their temperatures. So they might struggle with that. Like they are cold and they don't realize it, or the other way around, right? They're too warm. They don't know what to do. So I go through that checklist usually. And if those needs are all being met, sometimes it's just a desire for connection. So maybe trying to snuggle or trying to read a book together, play with a stuffy, sit down on the floor with them and just be with them, doing whatever it is that they might want to do, can be helpful. Again, I know that it can be tricky when they're crying and it's frustrating and you might have to be trying to do something else, or like get out the door or cook dinner or whatever the case is. But whenever possible, when we've gone through that mental checklist and we've met all their needs, I like to think that maybe it's an important moment that our child needs connection at that time. So if we can, if it's safe to stop what we're doing and give them a few minutes of our time, undivided time, that often can help soothe the child.
So I'm going to cut off the questions there. Sorry, guys. I know there are so many, and we really appreciate everyone for sharing. What we're going to do after is just compile any questions we didn't answer and shoot you guys a follow-up email with some of those answers so you're not left hanging. We are actually running a group for toddler parents in the new year. So I noticed there were a lot of toddler questions and we've seen a lot of similar things come up. So we've decided to put that together. It's going to run for 4 weeks. So I just dropped a link in the chat. We're just putting together a wait list right now. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to fill out the form and we can give you more information when we launch those dates. We also have an exclusive discount for Kids & Co parents. So if you're thinking of starting your own therapy journey or you've been sort of on the fence, we actually do offer Kids & Co parents the first session for free. So you can get an intro session to find your therapist, and then your first initial 60-minute session would be on us. So I dropped a link there for our website, but there'll also be a follow-up email from Kids & Co with some of that information. But if anything else, any other questions come up as well, feel free to respond to the email and we can make sure to include those in our Q&A. But thank you so much for having us, and thank you everyone for sharing.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Alison, for sharing your knowledge with us today. And thank you to all the attendees. Your participation was really great. As Sarah said, we will be sending out a recording of today's session for anyone who wasn't able to catch the entire presentation or just wants to watch some sections again. And we'll also send some responses to any questions that didn't get answered during the session and details on the offer from Alli Therapy. Amazing. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.